The number one question people ask me is, when do I need to book an albergue in advance? And, I'd say it's tough. That's the hardest part, I think, on the Camino. The thing that causes everyone the most stress, right? You want to make sure you have a bed for the night. Sometimes you're willing to be flexible and walk longer, but if you've had like a 20-mile day, you don't want to be going much further, right? It's tricky, and I would say like it varies by route and by time of year too. I'm hiking in May. It's a very popular time of year to hike. Last year it was the most popular month, and I'm hiking the Portuguese routes. So, these routes don't have as much infrastructure as the Frances. They have fewer pilgrims, of course, but that's been tricky for me, and I feel like caused me more stress because a lot of these routes, the stops, there will be a few albergues that have like 20 beds, so they've been a lot smaller, and that's been more challenging to navigate for me. So I'll start off by saying this: do not book all of your albergues in advance. You want the flexibility to be able to change your plans if you get hurt, or you just really feel like you need an extra rest day, or say you meet some really cool people and you want to stick with them on their Camino and adjust your plans to fit theirs. You really don't want to book your entire Camino in advance. So if you do plan on booking albergues, I recommend only doing so like max a few days in advance, unless you really want to stay somewhere very popular like Horizon on the Camino Frances can really fill up. It's a good idea to book that one, several weeks or even like a month or two in advance if you can. Same for Casa Fernanda on the Camino Portugues Central. I tried to stay there, and I reached out just a few days before, and she was like, no, I'm sorry, we're booked. If you really want to stay at an extra special popular albergue, it's a good idea to book more in advance, but generally you only need to book a few days beforehand. And while I like the idea of being flexible and not having a booking at all, the reality is that sometimes there are some towns where there aren't as many places to stay or whatnot, and if you really don't want to worry, if it's going to give you anxiety, like, book ahead. It's not a problem. I think the thing is, you may pay a little bit more because typically the municipal albergues, which are the cheapest, most bare bones albergues, they do not take reservations in advance. I've been surprised that some do. I made a reservation recently for one, but for the most part, they only take walk-in, so it's first come, first serve. If it's going to give you anxiety, book ahead. Like, there's nothing wrong with that. And yeah, you can usually do it a day or two in advance. Typically as I'm thinking about where I'm going to walk next, I'll kind of look ahead to the next like 2 or 3 days and kind of make my plans. And a lot of these albergues are on booking.com, so that's something to note. But not all of them are. Some of them you can make the bookings on their website, and sometimes booking on their website directly actually is cheaper. So that's something to keep in mind. So there are a few instances, where I would consider booking ahead. So if you're not sure, listen up. Number one, if you have a particularly long day ahead of you and you really don't want to feel rushed, I definitely recommend booking ahead. For me, I usually book ahead on any day where I'm hiking like 17, 18, 20 plus miles. I don't want to hike 20 miles and then have to risk hiking even farther because everything's booked. So that's one scenario. Number two, I would say in general, if you don't want to get up early, you don't want to think about staying off stage. Again, if it's just going to give you anxiety, I would say, book ahead. Don't, give yourself that stress. There are some days when I'm waking up at like 5 something in the morning. Sometimes it's to beat the heat or just because I know it's a long day. But sometimes it is because I'm trying to get to the albergue basically when it opens to try to make sure I get myself a spot. If you are going to be showing up to an albergue at like 3, 4, 5 p.m., sometimes even earlier though, you may not get a spot. My albergue the other day was completely full by 2 p.m. So that's something to keep in mind. And then number 3, I'd say, of course, if there's a really special albergue you want to stay in, say you found one with a pool that looks really cool, book that ahead. And I would say in general, if you're looking to stay in nicer accommodations and you're not as willing to stay in the bare bones municipal albergues, these are albergues where sometimes they don't even have soap. You have to use your body wash for your hand soap sometimes. These are albergues where you don't typically get sheets or towels, so you have to be prepared with, your sleeping bag liner or your sleeping bag and your own towel. The mattresses aren't as comfortable. They kind of pack more people in. If you're a little pickier with your accommodations, and definitely if you want a private room, I would say better to book ahead. I mean, on the Frances, I think some of my friends didn't book ahead and were still able to get private rooms or, nicer accommodations. And I definitely stayed in plenty of private albergues without booking ahead. But definitely, at least on the Portuguese route, I found a lot of them seem to be full if they take, advanced reservations, because again, these places are smaller. So I would say book ahead in that case too. If you know you're going to be staying somewhere small that doesn't have a lot of albergues, that's another instance when it's really good to book in advance. That's one reason why Oresan and then Borda right past it book up so quickly. They are literally the only places to stay if you want to cut that first day on the Camino Frances into 2 days. And then there are some other areas, along all the routes where there aren't very many beds. And you can kind of get a feel for that if you download one of the Camino apps. I personally use the Wise Pilgrim app. I really like it. A lot of people use the Buen Camino app, but those apps will tell you, they'll have a list of accommodation options in each place. They usually include the number of beds, assuming they have that information. And then, of course, you can kind of do some searching on your own too on Google Maps just to get a feel and see what options there are. I would keep this advice in mind too, if you are planning to do, say, the Portuguese coastal route or the Norte route that follows the coast along the north of Spain. Think about, even if you see a lot of accommodations, if it is a very busy holiday time, where folks are going to the beach, on their vacation, they're not hiking the Camino, you may be more inclined to book ahead, because for the most part, these accommodations will take anyone, unless it's a municipal albergue. These private albergues and hostels will also take holiday goers. So, you want to keep that in mind as well. If it is like peak of European summer holidays, I definitely recommend booking in advance. The last tip is consider booking in advance for the last 100 kilometers. That is where the Camino always gets the busiest, because, a lot of folks who don't have time, don't have, the physical ability or whatnot to do a hike, for 2 weeks, 4 or 5 weeks, they will just do the last 100 kilometers. So the trails get significantly busier. So it's a good idea to consider booking then in advance as well. Oh, and then one more point. If you are planning to ship your bag ahead each day, use one of those services, it's a good idea to book in advance as well, because you're going to need to tell that company where to send your bag. So that's the other instance where I would make sure you have your booking at least the night before when you're booking your luggage transfer.
So those are my top tips for trying to decide when to book an albergue in advance on the Camino, but I'd love to hear from you. If you have any other tips or questions, please leave them in the comments below. I've also included links to my favorite albergues on the Frances and the Portuguese routes in the description, so check those out. And of course, if you like this video, hit that subscribe button and stay tuned for more on the Camino de Santiago. Thank you, and buen camino!